Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product here at Alpha Software. And joining me shortly will be Selwyn Rabins, our president and co-founder, also our leader of our technical team, and he will be explaining a brand new feature that has come out in the pre-release. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're also here to answer any questions you may have. You could type those questions into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let us get started. Go ahead and, well, it looks like Selwyn is just joining us now. Just give me a moment. I'm gonna let him in. All right, there we go. Hello, Selwyn, are you there? Oh, he's connecting. I think he's on mute right now.
I'm here. I'm sorry, I was on mute. You're right.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, I just introduced you, and we're talking today about the JSON Form Box. So I'm going to go do a little introduction, and then Selwyn will hand it over to you to do a little demonstration. So
Okay.
as most of you know, the JSON, or the JavaScript Object Notation, is a way that allows you to communicate data or interchange data. It's considered a data interchange language, not a programming language unto itself, but a way of submitting data back and forth. You'll see JSON a lot. It was first introduced in, I guess, 1999. I believe it was first introduced actually at Yahoo, I believe was the first company to start creating API services using it. Now JSON is everywhere. If you've used the list control, or if you've used the viewbox control, you've already been familiar working with JSON. And today's new feature takes advantage of JSON in a really interesting way. Not only does it work with JSON data, but JSON itself is used to define the interface or the UI for your application. And it's a very, very cool thing. For those of you who aren't fully familiar, up to speed with JSON, you might be familiar with comma separated values, where you type in where data is defined, usually with a first row that indicates its field names, and then each of the values is separated by a comma underneath, or a CSV file. This is very commonly used in spreadsheets and so on. If you look at the equivalent of that over here in JSON, you'll see that each of these is actually has a field name next to it. And this type of array of data here has two big advantages. The first is that it allows you to handle hierarchical data. So in other words, you can put arrays within arrays. You can have parent, child, grandchild relationships, and you can have multiple of them. You can have siblings. You can also define new fields sort of on the fly. As soon as you enter in, for example, when you're using CSV, you have to let CSV know what the fields are that you're going to input, and that's that. Your data structure is set. Here with JavaScript, you can JSON, you can create what's called an arbitrary type of structure. So you can just simply add in elements as you need them. So that makes it very popular and very useful. So if you have taken a look at the pre-release recently, especially the one that came out on the 19th of June, Monday, and you were digging around in data controls, you would have come across this sort of unassuming little new data control called the JSON form, listed down here with the view box and the list. And like I said, the JSON form does display JSON and allows data entry of JSON, but it also takes JSON to define the element. So I want to show you just a little bit about how you can find more information, and then I'm going to ask someone to do a little demonstration. So over here, let me see. If you take a look at the pre-release notes and you scroll down, you're going to find a lot of cool stuff has been added since the last release. But over here, we have this tiny little section called JSON Forms. It looks very unassuming and it has a little link. If you click on that link, you're going to find, a huge list of videos that someone has put together for you. And this scrolls and scrolls and scrolls. So there's a lot of cool things covered. This is a very important new feature. But I don't think I could do it justice the way that Selwyn could. So I'm going to actually hand it over to you, Selwyn. Selwyn, I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go here and create a brand new project, and I'll just call it demo. So are you hearing me okay? Everything's okay? Everything's good? Dave?
Yep, everything's A-okay. Yes, thanks.
Okay, so let's start out. So first what I'm going to do is just give a really brief overview of what a JSON form is. So let's just create a brand new UX component over here. And then I'll go here to JSON forms and I'll create a form called JS1. So basically, so the first question you might have is, well, why would I need a JSON form when I can go and put individual input controls like text boxes, text areas, edit combos, selects, etc. On my form? And the reason is that JSON forms are very fast, very lightweight. So if you need a form with, say, 100 controls on it for first name, last name, address, city, state, zip, etc. In the old way, you would have to create 100 individual controls on your UX, and your UX would get quite big. But with a JSON form, it's just a single control that represents the entire form. So if I go now into the builder for the JSON form, which I can easily do by just double clicking over there, then here's my JSON form builder. So this is much like the list builder. In other words, it's a standalone builder here where you can define the elements of your JSON form. So I can go here and add controls to my JSON form. And you can see that there's a large selection of control types. So for data controls, there's text boxes, drop-down boxes, check boxes, edit combo, auto suggest, etc. And then we've got other controls. We've got buttons, HTML, images, and then custom JSON. We've got containers, we've got groups, frames, page, section, and then repeat, which is an interesting control type, which gives you something that's similar to a repeating section in a UX, or if you're a transform user, to a data group, and then tabs and tab panes, etc. So let's start out by just creating some data controls, and I'll go here and I'll type in, say, first name, last name, city, state, and zip, and then press OK. So the JSON form, you can see here, has been created. And I can preview the JSON form by clicking on the preview button over here, which opens up the preview window. And the preview window is modeless, which means that you can continue working on your definition while the preview is open. But the nice thing about the preview is that the preview is live. So you can see that if I click on, say, city over there, the preview moves to the city field over there. And also, if I click on, say, first name over here, then the builder synchronizes. So I can go here and make real-time updates. So you can see right now, we've got the label before the field. So if I go here and I change this to the label floating above the field, for example, over there. So this is basically what I'm doing right now, is defining how the control is rendered, and I'm specifying how the different pieces of the control, the label, the control itself, the error, etc., are going to be rendered. And these are a bunch of built-in renders, but you can also go and create your own render options. So I'm going to go there and choose that. So now we've basically changed this to label float above. And if we go now and open up the preview window, we should see label float above over there. So now if I go here and close that down and then run my form, and then let's just go here and save it as JForm1, you can see that the UX only has a single control visible, but it's actually a form with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 individual controls. So this is much lighter weight. So this is especially true when you get to a large number of fields, say maybe 100 or 500 fields on a form. JSON form will still be quite performant, but it's much lighter weight. So the reason that it's called the JSON form is there's actually two reasons. First of all, if we go here and say show the definition, you can see here's the definition of the form. So we've got an array over here of control types, and this is the definition of each control that we see. So basically, for example, here's the edit box, text box 3, which is, or text box, let's go to text box 1, which is last name is text box 2 over here. So from here to there is the definition of that control. So basically the definition itself is stored in JSON, and the data that is submitted is also JSON. So let's go ahead now and add some buttons to submit the data to the server. And what I'm going to do now is go to server-side events and put a debug 1 in the after dialog validate, so I can see what data got sent back to the server. So I'll go here and put in debug 1. So I'm going to go now and run this. And I'll type in, say, Fred Smith in Boston, Mass, and then hit the submit button. So the debugger opens up now. And if we look at e.data submitted over here, so let's just go here and look at e.data submitted. We'll see that basically the data submitted is just JS1, which is the name of this JSON form. And then the data itself is JSON over here. So you can see that if I copy this to the clipboard now, and so we've actually just got, we've got JSON data. And now if we want to go use set value and get value, we can do that as well. So let's go now and add a button here that says set value. So everybody should be familiar with the get value and set value methods, which allow you to read and set the value of controls on a UX component. So I'm going to go here now and say var text equals, and paste in the JSON over there. And then I'm going to go here and say dialog.object.set value of the JSON form, and I'm going to set the value to this JSON string over there, text. So let's go ahead now and run this. So if I go now and say set value, you can see that we've set the value of the entire form with just one command over there. So basically, JSON forms are like any other data control in that the sense that they support get value and set value, and therefore you can see that JSON forms are listed in the data controls section over here, basically, just like other data controls. So all of the controls in the data section support get value and set value. It's just that the JSON form is a much richer type of control. So the JSON form supports some very nice features, like number one, they're completely responsive. Number two, you can have what's called data-driven JSON forms. So a data-driven JSON form is a form that is rendered based on a definition that is stored in a database or an Excel file. So if I go over here to Excel and I look at, let's see if I have it over here. So here's an Excel file, you can see, that defines a bunch of questions here. So here's a question called first name. It's going to be a text box, and the variable is called fname, and it's on a form called form 1, and then I've got another form here called form 2. So this is a definition of a form. And if I go now to, let's just go to a sample component that uses this. So I'm going to go, sorry, just to over here, and then run this. So what you see on the screen right now is an empty JSON form. So there's a JSON form over here that has no controls in it at all. And then I have a button over here that says populate this JSON form using the data, using that Excel sheet. So this Excel sheet has two forms on it, Form 1 and Form 2. So if I go here to Form 1 and say populate, what we see is a JSON form coming up. This is a paginated JSON form. So it's got 3 pages, home, address, and phone. If I click on home, you can see that the form slides, that page slides into view over there. So this is a JSON form with a date picker over there. There's a are you married, which is a switch, and then favorite color, which is a button select. And you can see if we go back to our Excel file, we can see here that page 1, we're on page 1 right now, that page 1 of this form, which is over here, the home page, has these questions basically. First name, last name, date of birth, are you married, and favorite color. Then page 2, which is the address page, has address, city, state, and zip. So let's go back to our form now and go back and then go to the address page. So there's the address page. And now let's switch over to Form 2 and retrieve that. So there's Form 2 now that's come up, and you can see there's Form 2 with these 1, 2, 3 questions on it. So if we go look at the code behind this button, we can see that this button over here is making an AJAX callback using a function called XB over there. And if we go look at this function XB, we can see that the function XB gets the name of the form to load, and then it gets the name of the Excel file that contains the definition. So this could just as easily be a SQL database, and then it uses this helper function that does a query against this Excel file, retrieves the form that you asked for, and creates a bunch of form items, which we then use over here in JavaScript to populate the JSON form. So what this shows is how you can very easily create data-driven JSON forms where the form definition itself is based on a database structure or an Excel file structure. So the other thing that's nice about JSON forms, as I mentioned, is that they're completely responsive, and they are responsive both in terms of the layout of the form and also the size of the controls on the screen. So you can see if I go back to my JSON form, let's go back to this JSON form. Where did I have it? Over, not there, sorry. I'll just create a new one really quickly. So let's go and build a brand new JSON form. Yeah. And there's a number of actually useful quick starts for JSON forms. So you can see here, if I go to the JSON form and then open up the builder and then go to quick start, you can create a JSON form by pasting in some sample JSON data. So I can go there and say insert sample, and I'll say a nested array. So here's the sample data. So I've got first name, last name, city, state, and zip. And then I've got each person has children. And if I go here and I say reformat, it'll be easier to see. So each person has a number of children, and each child has a number of hobbies. So this is parent, child, grandchild data. So if I click OK here, the JSON form gets created, and you can see that we've got a repeat group here for the children, and then another repeat group for the hobbies. So if we go and we run this now, let's just make this JSON form a little bit wider, 50% of the screen. What we have is this is the top level, first name, last name, city, state. Then we have children, and then we can add a child. So this is name and age, and then we have hobbies, which is a grandchild, and we can go here and we can add hobbies. So what this is showing here is how JSON forms can handle very complex data structures, very hierarchical data structures with parent, child, grandchild, etc. Data, much more complex data structures than the UX itself can handle if you use individual controls. So another nice thing about JSON forms is that they can be used very easily for the detail view of a list. So let's go here and create a brand new list control. So I'll go here and I'll add a list control, say list 1. and I'll go to this list and I'll just use some static data. Let's go pick up, say, name and address over there, and then go to the list layout, and I'll choose a bunch of fields. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a JSON form on the screen, JF1. But I'm not going to actually define the JSON form. I'm going to just leave it empty. And then I'm going to go back to the list here and say that this list has a detail view. Then I'm going to go to the detail view section over here. And I'm going to say that the detail view type is a JSON form, and that the JSON form should be generated automatically on the server side or on the client side. So the reason that you would choose the client side is if you retrieve data, say, for example, from a NoSQL database, where every row in the database has a different structure or a different schema. So, but in this particular case, every row in my database has the same schema, so I can just choose server side over there. And then I've got to specify what JSON form I'm using. I'm using JSON Form 1, JF1. So let's go ahead now, and I'll just make this 50%, so it's a little bit bigger. Go ahead and run this now. So there's our list, there's our empty JSON form right there. And when I click on a row, oh, something went wrong here. Did I get a JavaScript error or? Let me just do this a little bit differently. Let's go here and say quick start Genie, and I'll say build it on a list, and no, sorry, on a list, and then choose the list, and I'll choose list number 2 over there. So there's my JSON form built on the same structure as the list. And if I go now into, I'm going to have to actually go back to the list and change it to a predefined JSON form. So go back to the list here, over here, detail view, and say it's a predefined JSON form over there. So now I can go and run this now. So if I click on a row, there's the JSON form populated. So you can see that if I go back to design mode, we only have 2 controls on this UX component. And if you had done this with individual controls, you would have had many, many more individual controls. So the JSON form results in a much lighter weight form than a UX component would have. So Dave, I've been going on for quite some time now. So is there more that you'd like me to show, or are there questions? Or
so yes, there are a few questions that we could go in. So the first one was, does it support right to left?
Yes,
it does. And so the second thing, and I suspect that it supports that by using CSS.
It's just CSS, right? Yeah.
Right. So that brings us to question 2 of how do you go ahead and tweak the CSS for a JSON form? Where do you find it? Where do you edit it?
The most common place in where you would tweak stuff would be if you go to an individual control, for example, there.
Okay.
And you look at the layout, you can see there's the layout. And this basically, this current layout is layout above. But if I go here, I'd say ad hoc, and I say add. So this is, I can now define over here the template for a control. So that a control contains these sort of elemental pieces: content, label, error, and description. And I can put those on in the template. That's just HTML, and I can wrap any HTML around that. And then, of course, just like any other control in the UX, you can define styles and classes. So if I go to this control, say there, you can see we've got styles for the label style, the container style, etc. So you can define styles, and of course you can for JSON forms you've got computed values, show hide values, which is all written in JavaScript, and enable expressions, summary fields, just like you can in a regular UX component.
Very nice. So what was the inspiration behind the JSON Form Builder?
So JSON forms are, we actually use them in Transform, but they are inspired by, in Transform, the form definition is JSON. So this is a way of taking some of the concepts of Transform and applying them to the UX component, so that you have the benefits of these very lightweight JSON forms in Alpha Anywhere, not just in Transform as well. And ultimately, our goal is that you should be able to import a Transform form definition into JSON forms, and also export a JSON form definition into a Transform form as well.
Oh, that'd be very cool. Another question that came up, is it possible to have multi-select lists?
Yes. So let's go here and delete all these controls, and then go here and say data controls, and I'll say it's an edit combo. I'll just call it EC1 over there. And then I'll go to my data type. I can say it's either dynamic or static. I'll say it's dynamic, and my connection string is going to be Northwind. And my SQL here is going to basically be the customer table. And I'll say company name. And I thought there was a multi-select, allow multiple selections over there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's go ahead now and see what happens if I run this. Okay, so you can see I've selected two values there.
Using control click to select them.
Well, I think it's an option in the builder. If we go back to the builder, we can see that I think it was there, control click or just click. So you have an option for the select mode.
Very cool. You're getting back some high praise for that feature there. Excellent. So this is the big question that everyone is always going to ask whenever we show pre-release features, is when will it become a production feature? Do you have any sense?
So our goal is to release a stable build sometime next week.
Fantastic.
So it should become a stable build, a release feature next week.
Wonderful.
But the thing is that I've only shown a tiny fraction of what's in JSON forms. I would encourage everybody to read the pre-release notes, go through the videos. There's a lot of stuff in the JSON form videos that show off different features of the JSON forms.
Right, as I showed earlier, when you show up to the pre-release notes, scroll down to JSON forms. It's a little tiny snippet, but it has a hyperlink to a whole nother page with a gazillion videos on it. So go and watch them. That looks like it. Let's see if we have any more questions. I think that's about it. Wonderful. Hey, Selwyn, thank you very much for coming and talking to us today. Thanks everyone for showing up. Appreciate you being here. We look forward to seeing you at our next Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. In the meantime, if you do have questions, you could always send them to guides, GUIDES, @alphasoftware.com. All right, take care and stay well. Bye-bye.